My name is Daniel Foster. I'm 44 years old, and until the night of our anniversary dinner, I thought I knew what love was supposed to look like. 10 years of marriage, 10 years of building a life side by side through mortgages, lost jobs, the pandemic, the 1,000 little storms that test two people and, somehow, make them stronger. Or so I thought. That night, I dressed the way she liked. Navy blazer, open collar, no tie. I still remember checking my reflection twice, telling myself that we were just in a rough patch, that dinner might help us reconnect. She had chosen the restaurant herself, a rooftop place downtown with white tablecloths, low lighting, and a skyline that made everything look more romantic than it really was. When I saw her waiting by the window, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked incredible. Black dress, gold earrings, perfect hair. But her eyes had that distance I'd been pretending not to notice for months. She smiled when I walked in, that polite kind of smile you give a coworker, not a husband. "Happy anniversary," she said, and kissed me on the cheek. Something about the way she said it, flat, rehearsed, made the air feel colder. Still, I smiled back. 10 years, I said. We made it. She laughed softly, almost like she didn't want to. We ordered drinks, my usual bourbon, her favorite martini, and for a while, we just talked about small things. Her new clients, the traffic, the weather. Every word between us felt like it had to crawl across a frozen lake to survive. Then her phone lit up. She turned it face down without even looking. A year ago, that would have been nothing. Now it was everything. I used to think distrust was loud, yelling, accusations, drama. It isn't. It's quiet. It's the pause after a text message she won't explain. It's the way she locks the screen a little too fast. It's the silence that settles between two people who used to tell each other everything. For months, I had tried to make excuses for her. She was stressed, overworked, tired, all the things people say when love starts to die but you don't want to admit it. But that night, the excuses finally ran out. The waiter brought our drinks. She raised her glass. "To 10 more," she said, smiling that same hollow smile. I clinked mine against hers and took a sip. It burned, but not from the bourbon. It burned because I knew this wasn't a celebration. It was a performance, and I was the only one who didn't know my role yet. As we waited for our food, I tried to fill the silence. "How was Chicago?" I asked. Her last work trip, 3 days. No photos, no details, just vague comments about long meetings. She looked up from her glass. Busy. Productive. Then back down again. I smiled. "Did the client sign the deal?" She hesitated. "Not yet. Still negotiating." And that was it. Conversation over. The steak arrived. Medium rare. Perfect. I didn't taste a thing. She picked at her salad like she was waiting for the check. By dessert, the waiter didn't even bother offering coffee. I wish I could tell you that I confronted her right then, that I demanded answers. But I didn't. Because somewhere deep down, I already knew. The truth was bigger than I was ready to face. And by midnight, I would be in an ambulance. It hadn't started at that dinner. The unraveling began months before, small cracks that I ignored because they didn't look like cracks yet. The late nights, the new passwords on her laptop, the way she stopped laughing at my jokes. Then there was the second phone. I found it by accident, tucked under the passenger seat of her car when I was cleaning it out one weekend. No case, no contacts, no photos, just empty. Wiped clean like it had something to hide. When I asked her, she smiled. "Oh, that? Work phone. Conference calls." Conference calls at midnight. Sure, that was when the doubt started to harden into something else. Fear. I didn't know what she was planning, but I knew it wasn't good. I should have trusted my gut that night. Should have left the table when the waiter looked nervous, when he glanced at me like he wanted to say something but couldn't. Instead, I stayed. I smiled through the small talk, pretending not to notice that my wife was waiting for something. A signal. A moment. When she finally reached for her drink again, she looked almost relieved. And that's when I realized this dinner wasn't about celebrating 10 years. It was about ending them. Halfway through dinner, I told Tessa I needed to make a quick call to the dealership. That was a lie. I just needed a moment to breathe, to step away from the table, from her, from the look in her eyes that felt less like love and more like calculation. I slipped through the glass doors that led to the service hallway, polished floors, muffled music, and the faint scent of rosemary from the kitchen. For the first time all evening, I felt my heartbeat catch up to what my gut had been screaming for months. Something's wrong. That's when I heard a voice behind me. "Sir?" I turned. It was a waiter. Young guy, couldn't have been older than 22. Nervous eyes, hands fidgeting with the tray he held too tightly. "Yeah?" I said. He glanced over his shoulder, then back at me, like he was about to confess to a crime. "I'm sorry, I probably shouldn't say anything," he started, his voice low, almost trembling. "But I think your wife just slipped something into your drink." For a moment, I thought I'd misheard him. "My wife," I repeated. He nodded, quick and serious. "When you went to the restroom earlier, she reached into her bag and poured something into your glass. It dissolved instantly. I saw it, I swear." My mouth went dry. "Are you sure?" He swallowed. "I wouldn't risk my job if I wasn't. I've seen her here before, a few times actually. Always with the same glass of whiskey, same bag." He hesitated. "She scares me," he whispered. "That's why I'm telling you." Then he turned and disappeared into the kitchen before I could ask another question. I stood there frozen, the noise of the restaurant muffled by the sound of my own pulse. It didn't make sense. It couldn't. Tessa, my Tessa. But deep down, I knew the waiter wasn't lying. I walked back into the dining area, trying to keep my breathing steady. The room looked the same, candlelight flickering across the tables, soft jazz humming under the chatter of strangers. But everything felt sharper now, colder. She was still sitting there, calm and elegant, swirling her wine like she didn't have a secret in the world. "Everything okay?" she asked when I sat down. Her voice was soft, almost too soft. "Yeah," I said. "Just a call from one of the mechanics." "Nothing serious," she smiled faintly. "Still putting out fires?" "Always," I said. I glanced down at our drinks. 2 glasses sat side by side. Mine, the half-empty bourbon, and hers, untouched. They looked identical now. I tried not to stare too long. If she really had slipped something into mine, I couldn't just sit there and accuse her. Not here, not with people around. So I did the only thing I could. I switched them. Slow, casual, like I was just clearing space between us. I slid my glass toward her side, her martini toward mine. She didn't even blink. "You know what?" I said, forcing a smile. 10 years. That's something worth celebrating. She raised her glass automatically. "To 10 more," she said. We clinked. I lifted the martini to my lips and pretended to take a sip. She lifted the whiskey, the drink the waiter said she'd touched, and took a real one. Not a polite sip, not a testing taste. A full, deliberate swallow. Then she smiled. And for the first time that night, she looked relieved, like something heavy inside her had finally lifted. I smiled back, though my stomach felt like it was turning to ice. The next 5 minutes were the longest of my life. We talked, or at least she did, about work, about the weather, about how beautiful the skyline looked in the reflection of the windows. Her words blurred into noise. All I could think about was what I'd just done. What if the waiter was wrong? What if I'd misunderstood? What if I'd just handed my wife a drink she didn't deserve to die from? But every time I looked at her, that doubt melted a little more. Because the truth was in her eyes. There was no confusion there, no affection, no warmth, just relief. 10 minutes later, she reached for her water. Her hand shook. just slightly, but enough for me to see it. She smiled again, softer now, her eyelids a little heavy. I felt my pulse pounding in my ears. "Are you okay?" I asked. She nodded slowly. "Just tired." Then she blinked, once, twice, and slumped forward, the glass sliding from her hand. The sound of it shattering against the table was the last thing I heard before the screaming started. The sirens were deafening. The red lights outside the ambulance blurred through my tears as I tried to keep up with the paramedics pushing her inside. "Tessa, can you hear me?" I shouted. Nothing. Just the sound of her shallow breathing. By the time we reached the emergency room, she was unconscious. The nurses swarmed her. IVs, monitors, questions I couldn't answer. I stood there frozen in the hallway holding her purse like it was a bomb. Inside, I could still smell the faint trace of her perfume. Sharp, floral, expensive. A scent I used to love. Now it just made me sick. Hours passed. The clock above the reception desk glowed 12:14 a.m. when a doctor finally walked toward me. Mid-50s, calm, steady voice, eyes that had seen too much. "Mr. Foster?" he asked. I nodded, barely. "She's stable," he said, but it was close. She ingested a potent sedative, not something over the counter. This was lab-grade, specialized. He paused, studying my face. "Do you have any idea how she might have gotten access to something like that?" I didn't answer. Because I knew the answer already. I just didn't want to hear it out loud. He sighed. "The police will need to take a statement. We've already contacted them." Then he walked away, leaving me standing in that cold, humming corridor, holding a wedding ring that suddenly felt like a piece of evidence. When the detective arrived, I told him everything: the waiter's warning, the second phone, the switch, the glass. Every small detail that had been clawing at the edges of my mind for months. Detective Weller, late 40s, gruff but focused, listened without interrupting. When I finished, he flipped his notepad shut. "This wasn't spontaneous," he said quietly. "She planned this." Down to the timing, I felt the floor tilt beneath me. "You're saying she tried to—" He nodded. "Poison you?" "Yes. The toxicology report confirms it." The words hit harder than I expected. Even after everything, the distance, the lies, part of me had still been hoping there was another explanation. Something human, something forgivable. But there wasn't. 2 days later, while she was still in police custody at the hospital, I got a call from one of her co-workers, a woman named Dana. I'd only met her once at a holiday party, but her voice was trembling when she spoke. "Daniel," she said, "I don't know if I should be calling you, but you need to know something. There's been an internal investigation at the firm. Missing funds, forged invoices, and your wife's name is all over it." My blood ran cold. "What kind of missing funds?" "Large transfers," she said. "Shell accounts, overseas wires, and Daniel, she recently filed paperwork giving her power of attorney over someone's estate. We assumed it was her mother's, but the name on the document was yours." I hung up. My hands were shaking when I opened my laptop. Emails, bank statements, investment files I hadn't looked at in years, all handled by her. At first, it looked normal. She had always been the organized one, the one who handled the paperwork, the taxes, the boring stuff. But buried deep inside the folder labeled House Finances, I found it, a notarized document with my forged signature. It granted Tessa limited financial control in the event that I was hospitalized or cognitively impaired. Another one, filed just weeks earlier, named her power of attorney, full authority over every asset in my name if I became incapacitated. I stared at those files until the words blurred. If I hadn't switched those glasses that night, she would have had everything: the business, the house, the accounts. She didn't want me gone because of love lost. She wanted me gone because it was profitable. That realization broke something in me. Not in anger, not even in grief, but in clarity. This wasn't about a failed marriage. It was about control. For months, I'd been living with a woman who looked me in the eye every morning and said, "Have a good day, honey," while quietly preparing the paperwork to erase me from my own life. I called my attorney, Joel, the next morning. He read through the documents twice, then looked up at me with disbelief. "Daniel," he said slowly, "if you hadn't switched those drinks, she would have had full legal access within 24 hours. This wasn't impulsive. This was corporate-level planning." And that's when it truly hit me. My wife hadn't just tried to poison me. She had been building a plan. One careful document, one fake signature, one lie at a time. The hearing room was smaller than I expected. No grand courtroom drama, just fluorescent lights, microphones, and a woman I used to love sitting across from me like a stranger. Tessa looked different. Not broken. No, she'd never let herself look broken, but smaller somehow. Like someone had finally stripped away the armor she'd worn her whole life. Her lawyer did most of the talking. Stress. Emotional collapse. A woman pushed too far. All the usual phrases lawyers use when the truth is too ugly to say out loud. The detective, Weller, sat beside the prosecutor. He didn't speak much either. He didn't need to. The evidence spoke louder than any words ever could. The forged documents, the second phone, the poison, the trail of money flowing quietly overseas. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't rise for revenge. I didn't raise my voice. I just told the truth. I told them how we met, two broke dreamers trying to build a life together. How she laughed the first time she sat in my old pickup, knees pressed against the dashboard, claiming it smelled like old oil and new beginnings. How we built the business side by side, and how, somewhere along the way, she stopped holding my hand and started calculating the worth of what we'd built. The room was quiet when I finished. Not out of pity, out of realization. She had everything she needed: trust, access, opportunity. And she used it all not to love me, but to erase me. When the judge finally spoke, his voice was calm. He didn't deliver a movie speech. No theatrics, just facts. "Mrs. Foster," he said, "you are charged with attempted poisoning, financial fraud, and falsification of legal documents. Bail is denied." The sound of the gavel hit the table like thunder. Tessa didn't cry. She didn't even flinch. She just turned her head slightly, looked at me once, long enough for me to see something flicker in her eyes, then looked away. Regret? Shame? Maybe just annoyance that her plan failed. I'll never know. After the hearing, I walked outside into the cold November air. For the first time in months, I didn't feel heavy. I didn't feel angry. Just still. Joel met me on the courthouse steps. "She's facing years," he said quietly. I nodded. "I don't want to follow it. No appeals, no press." He nodded back. Understood. I wasn't interested in revenge. I'd already won the only battle that mattered: survival. In the weeks that followed, I started showing up to the shop early again. Not the office, the floor. The place that smelled like grease, metal, and the kind of hard work no one can fake. I rolled up my sleeves and got back under the hood, fixing engines with my own hands. That's where I felt human again. One afternoon, I saw a familiar face walk through the door. Jason, the waiter from that night. He looked surprised that I remembered him. "Hey," I said, wiping my hands on a rag. "You saved my life. The least I can do is offer you a job." He blinked, stunned. "Seriously?" "Seriously," I said. "You ever think about learning logistics or management? You've got instincts." He smiled. "Guess I owe you dinner then." We both laughed. For the first time in a long time, it felt like real laughter, not something forced to fill silence. A few months passed. Winter melted into spring, and with it, the constant noise in my head began to fade. The lawyers stopped calling. The detectives stopped asking questions. Even the headlines, the ones that briefly made me that guy whose wife tried to poison him, disappeared into the endless scroll of the next scandal. And for the first time in years, my life was quiet. Real quiet. I kept the same morning routine. Coffee at 6, black with a single spoon of sugar. Drive to the shop before the sun was fully up. Jason was usually already there, sleeves rolled, a clipboard in one hand. That same nervous energy that used to spill from him now turned into focus. "Morning, boss," he'd say. "Morning," I'd reply. It was simple, steady, real. The dealership grew again. Not fast, not flashy, just honest. One customer at a time, one rebuilt engine at a time. Some days I still caught myself reaching for my ring finger. That phantom weight never really left. But instead of grief, now it just reminded me I survived. I started speaking, quietly, at local meetups. Not to tell a story of revenge, but of awareness, of how easily trust can turn into blindness, of how people who mean the world to you can also be the ones to hurt you the most. Not all danger, I'd tell them, comes with fists or threats. Sometimes it wears perfume and smiles at you across the table. The room would always fall silent, not out of fear, out of recognition, because almost everyone has a version of Tessa in their life, someone who drains without leaving bruises. One evening, after everyone left the shop, I sat in my office, the small one in the back with a crooked window and a squeaky chair. Outside, the city hummed in the distance. The same city that had nearly buried me now just sounded alive. I looked at the photo still pinned to the corkboard, me and Tessa, 10 years younger, covered in grease and smiling in front of our first sign. Foster Auto, honest work, honest hands. For a moment, I almost took it down, but then I didn't, because that smile, that moment, was real, and pretending it wasn't would make me no better than the lie she became. I still wear the watch she gave me, the one engraved, "To more wins." But now, every time I glance at it, I think, you were right. There were more wins, just not the kind you planned, not the money, not the business, not even the justice. The win was walking away still whole, still human. People ask me sometimes if I ever forgave her, and the truth is, yes. Not because she deserved it, but because I did. Forgiveness isn't about letting someone back in. It's about letting yourself walk free. So I forgave her, and then I forgot her. Now, when the sun hits the shop windows just right, and I hear Jason laughing with the crew, I feel something I thought I'd never feel again. Peace. Not the kind that comes after victory. The kind that comes after survival. Quiet, steady, earned peace. I sip my coffee, look out at the sky, and whisper to myself, I made it. And for once, that's enough.